Thank you so much. I'd like to welcome back to the stage director and producer David Grubin. He's going to be in conversation with moderator Deirdre Fernandez from the Boston Globe, and they're going to introduce the rest of the panelists. So please welcome everyone.
Microphones over there.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I think we have some more panelists joining us. Hold on one second. Calm down. Here's Josh. Perfect.
David, can I hand you this?
Well, thank you all for joining us and making the film we watched. It was great. I think everybody learned a lot from it. And I don't know if you guys want to just introduce yourself. I think everybody, David and Tamara, everybody I think knows.
Hi, I'm Sierra. I'm currently serving as Harvard College's Generational African American Student Association's president. And under that role, we've been very forward in making sure that we're supporting the Harvard Coalition to free Renty in any way we possibly can. And one of those ways is being here today to support you, but also in our future programming in any possible way that we can support free Renty. We try to do so. So it's very great to be here.
And Josh is the lawyer behind the mask. One of the questions, I'm sorry, I'm Deirdre Fernandez. I'm a reporter with the Boston Globe. I've covered the story and cover higher ed. And I've written about this, and I was wondering, David, if you could tell us what compelled you to explore this topic and make sure it was on film.
Well, Mike Koskoff is my cousin. And he called me one day and said, I have this very interesting case for you. He told me about it, and of course the case bringing up all the issues that are the push button, the hot button issues of our time. That interested me right away, but I said, yeah, but I have to meet Tammy. It's all about Tammy. And so he invited me to meet Tammy, and I said yes as soon as I met her. Because she's such an amazing woman, and I admired her perseverance and the sense that she just was not going to give up. And there's a certain integrity about it that meant this was going to be a real story. So that's really what got me into this, Mike and Tammy.
It was wonderful. And Tammy, we've gotten a sense of how long you've been fighting this battle. I'm kind of wondering what it was like when the judge's decision came and how you keep persevering and keep fighting this battle. I know you mentioned, it gets harder and harder to pick yourself up, but what do you go to?
Well, I remember the moment when I got the call, and strangely, it was I was out walking, and I looked at my phone, and it was a number from France, I believe. It was a foreign reporter calling me for comments about the decision. And I said, you must be mistaken. I haven't heard anything about the decision. And so he said, I have it here. I'll read it to you. And so I remember him reading it, and I remembered feeling, firstly, disappointed, and then secondly, not surprised. I was disappointed that I didn't feel the court had given our complaint and our argument serious consideration. And I remembered also feeling not surprised by that.
And where do you're appealing the case, correct?
Yes.
So what keeps you fighting, and how do you pick yourself up after a decision like that?
My motivation is my mother, and The one thing that I think, in terms of our relationship, that's one thing that I hope people walk away with an understanding of. I was very close to my mother, and this was so very important to her, who Papa Renty was, and that we memorialize the story by creating a family tree. And so what motivates me is how outraged I know she would be at learning this story. And I feel like almost a sense of her indignation driving me to correct this wrong. So my mother is my motivation. I will continue to fight as long as I can. I believe we are on the right side of history. We're on the right side of the law. And I'm just hoping that, that our complaint will be given the serious consideration that it deserves.
And this is a question for any of you. Like, what do you hope people take out of this film, and what do you want to happen out of it?
Go to the director.
It's musical mics here.
Oh,
Go ahead, director.
well, one of the things that I find, looking at the film now is how it connects to the cruelty of slavery and how horrible slavery was. And it's memorialized in that photo. There's so much feeling in that human being's face that we can never forget. So on that level, and all of that is embodied in Tammy's struggle. So one thing, it's kind of understanding what it means to be a descendant of someone who suffered in that way. I hope people can take away that. And then, of course, on the bigger level, Tammy should get these photos and decide what to do with them. And that's the simple part of it.
I just recently was looking at the photos, and I was preparing for our response to Harvard's motion before this Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court. And I realized, yes, they are photos that show the horrors of slavery, but really, what they really show are two people who, in the minutes and hours before those photos were taken, were abused and were humiliated. And if you want to see a horrible picture of slavery, there are any number of pictures of lynchings you can see. But those images, to me, are more increasingly about the torture that they were put through as human beings. And Delia's tears that are so often spoken of, those are not tears per se of slavery. They're tears of somebody of a young girl or young woman who's been forced to strip in front of her father. That's just tears of abuse. So I think it's really important that this truth comes out. Because what the argument that they're making that has some traction with educated people and with universities is that they are somehow depict slavery in a way that no other photos do. But they don't. They depict abuse. And they depict abuse by somebody who was Harvard's employee, not just an employee, but their prized scientist, somebody they glorified in life and in death. And until that truth is told, then there is no such, as Tammy so eloquently talks about, veritas. That's Harvard's motto. How can you have veritas when that truth is buried by Harvard? So we can't assume anything anymore when a photograph like this is in the hands of people who have a vested interest in telling a particular version of history.
I guess what I was struck by when watching the documentary, this is my first time watching it, was the Harvard, as I say, the corporation. They gave this case that was about what would Tammy do with the photos? Would she present it, or would she keep them hidden from the world? But as we saw throughout the film, and as a film, as the film of itself just kind of shows, is the history of these pictures and everything that we've been able to see and how this history of the pictures have come about, and everything that's come to fruition and come into existence and come well known about because of Tammy. And I don't think Harvard was doing that in any of the ways like that. We didn't know, they didn't even know the pictures existed until a couple decades ago. So I think that as Harvard, the corporation, as it often has to be done, it's pushed by what is commonplace, what is socially acceptable in the moment. A couple years ago, I would have never seen a statement from Harvard about Black Lives Matter or of anything of the sort. And I think in the same way that we push the standard, the morality standard up higher when we kind of talk about things like this, hopefully this film will be a branch onto kind of starting that conversation and pushing the moral bar a little bit higher, because it's not necessarily about, getting rid of this trauma that's existing or like eradicating Tammy's burden of having to see these pictures of her ancestors up in Harvard's museums and everywhere, because obviously that's not going to happen. This case is traumatic in and of itself. As you can see, pushing forward each day is a struggle. But I think that hopefully with this film, which and just in general with the case, we can kind of start to raise the moral bar a little bit higher and start to be able to look at these situations and force Harvard as a corporation and as currently a corporation that just looks at the moral standard and goes slightly beneath it or meets it to the lowest extent possible. We can push them a little bit higher than that, hopefully.
Thank you. David, I was wondering, because Harvard obviously didn't want to be on camera talking about this. I was curious, was it hard to find anybody to defend Harvard's view or talk about Harvard's view, except for the end with the lawyer, or was that a decision you made as a filmmaker?
As I say in the film, I wanted very much to talk to Harvard. I asked, obviously, to talk to the president. I asked to talk to Drew Faust, who is, an extraordinary scholar of this period. Numbers of the faculty. I mean, Harvard has this. I mean, look, they've got great scholars and fine teachers, but the corporation must have stepped in, because the public relations person said to me, "Hey, I'm getting all these requests. I don't want you to talk to any of these people." And it did affect me, because I would have liked to have heard their arguments. In the end, you do hear them. The lawyer gives them, and one's a technical legal argument, and the other is, well, we're an educational institution, and so we should, be able to have these. And of course, why should they be the ones when these are Tammy's people? So it would have made a different film if they would have talked, but I think it would have. I don't think they have very good arguments, and that's why they didn't want to talk.
It is kind of an interesting question of who gets to tell the story, right? And what story gets told. And I think that was kind of the running theme of this fight in the film, too. And it is, I was also struck by, in the film, kind of this debate over reparations, restitution, what to call it, how to say it, what is just and what is fair. And I was kind of curious from your take, from everybody's take, of, Harvard is grappling with its history of slavery, it's studying it, and there are several committees out there looking at it. Do you think the country and Harvard is ready to talk about reparations, restitution, and why is it such a difficult topic to even name?
Well, how do we actually know they're grappling with it? I mean, all we know is that they say they're grappling with it. And to Ta-Nehisi Coates' point, he was standing up there and he got a smattering of applause when he mentioned reparations. And here's the dirty secret, I guess, is that Harvard didn't care about Agassiz. Harvard, before this lawsuit, Agassiz was the man. Agassiz was renowned. He was celebrated. They named schools after him. And then after this lawsuit, Agassiz who? Let's call a book about, including Renty and Delia's images, let's call them the Zealy daguerreotypes. Let's distance ourselves from Agassiz. I got an idea. Let's put $5 million into studying our relationship with slavery. This is an institution that is considered the highest educational institution in America. And they're now all of a sudden studying their connection with slavery because of Tamar's lawsuit. So, and look what happens. And I'm not blaming you, but look what happens. Harvard's looking into reparations. Are they? Are they really? What more do they need to know? Seriously, I mean, is it, it's actually so depressing that Harvard, they came out and they said, here we're going to do a $5 million study to study our connection with slavery. Of course, the results of that study, who knows when they're going to be in. Will they even be in the 21st century? Because they just don't want to really get to the kinds of things that Tamar is talking about in this lawsuit, the kind of things that Ta-Nehisi Coates was talking about, the kind of real reparations. And it works. Look how it works. Harvard's looking into their reparations. Harvard's looking into it. How much more time do they really need? I mean, it's Harvard. So this is really something that we have to start asking ourselves, because it is tricky. It's really tricky because we all give Harvard, a lot of us more than others. People like me give Harvard a lot of credit because I was taught, you know, it's in my kind of bias that Harvard will do the right thing. But they get a lot of credit for being who they are, and undeservedly so, I think, in this area.
And it also needs to be said, and I applaud the students, because I think this is the third time that Harvard has rebooted this campaign to explore their ties to slavery. I think in 2008, 2011, and now again. And in each time they did this investigation, this study of their ties, and they buried the outcomes. And what I'm fortunate enough to have is a relationship with the students who share this information with me. And so when Harvard is saying, we are doing this or we're committed to this, I'll hear on social media or some other platform, that's not the case, this is what's real. And so what is clear to me is what Harvard says publicly is very different from what they practice privately.
Yeah, I think it's almost condescending the way that I've interacted with Harvard about these types of situations. You were mentioning the Agassiz building, or just Agassiz in general. They have a building named after Agassiz here. We were talking about this. GASA, Generational African American Students Association, has led a campaign to kind of talk about the names of Harvard's buildings and how a lot of them are tied to slaveholders or people who have really racist histories. One of the focal points of our campaign was going to be talking about the Agassiz building. And then once again, with technicalities, they brought up, oh no, it's not named after him, it's named after his wife. Which to me, or to us, didn't seem to make a huge, yes. And they said, oh, it's not him, it's his husband. It's a different situation. And in a lot of these ways, and I've also had direct interaction with the legacy. The Agassiz comment was made to me by a Harvard faculty member. So it's not like, there are a lot of these condescensions, I think, that come when you're having these conversations, and a lot of technicalities and a lot of, oh, we can't do this, or we can't just concede this because it could mean this. And then with the Legacy of Slavery Committee as well, not to talk negatively about anybody on that committee or anything that's like any specific person, because I think a lot of people who are working with that have the right intentions, or just put in place by a larger corporation that's not working towards the means that they think they're working towards. But oftentimes when we've tried to launch programming with them, or kind of take advantage of the fact that they are existing and trying to look into the legacy of slavery, which is what we as an organization are trying to do, they'll block us or say, you can't have this person come and speak. Just like an event we were trying to throw on a couple weeks from now, which we had to separate ourselves from them from, just because of the fact that these certain, like, it's a very narrow idea. We're going to look at slavery in this way with these precautions put in place to make us sure we're not looking bad, or we're not getting too deep into the legacy of slavery. And I think that those like little stepping stone, or not stepping stones, but like little stopping points that they have, are just very condescending, very limiting, and it just doesn't lead to us moving in any positive direction at all.
Well, I mean, that's kind of I guess the issue is that it's still very hard to talk about, right? Or talk about without, there are certain set boundaries where people can have a conversation, but it is hard, like you said, how do you talk about it? And it's interesting that it still remains a difficult conversation for the country and for the students and faculty to have at Harvard. So I guess, Tamara, maybe the question is, would you like to see happen with these daguerreotypes? If you got them, what do you want to do?
Well, again, I am fighting for the right to choose how the images are used, how they are seen, and how they are discussed. Because right now, Harvard is still perpetrating a false narrative as to who these enslaved people are. They recently published a book last year after we filed the complaint, saying we know nothing about particularly Renty, the man in the image, when they know his legacy, but they refuse to acknowledge it. So I'm fighting to have the truth told. I'm fighting to have control and an interest in how they are seen, viewed, displayed, and used. And right now, Harvard has absolute dominion and control over them, and they are leading with a false narrative as to who these enslaved people are. And that is another insult and attack against their dignity, to deny them their heritage and their legacy and their humanity.
I was going to open up the floor for any other questions from the audience too. So if you guys have any questions, I think there might be somebody who you can stand up, raise your hand. I think it's a small enough room that maybe we can hear questions if anybody has any. Questions? Oh, is there? I'm sorry, go ahead.
Much of the facts that are presented and much.
Are we going to do this repeat the question?
Sure.
Okay. Much of the facts that are presented and much of the argument that we hear, we don't hear it all, of course we can't, in terms of extracting these daguerreotypes from Harvard and providing some choice about their use, seems to sound in what we lawyers call tort. That is, that there was such a invasion of privacy and an abusive use of the private aspect of these people's lives that Mr. Agassi and Harvard should be required to get rid of them. But the judge in the case treated it as though it's just a property case. So my question is, was it presented as just the property case, a question of ownership?
No.
Do you understand what I'm asking?
Yeah, well, there's property. Who planted this guy in here? Property is a fuzzy legal concept, right? Like, so it does involve privacy, right? And actually the current thinking of property law is that it really involves what has been described as a bundle of sticks. Is property really a tangible thing always? No, we know that because a melody, for example, can be a property, or a thought that is, takes hold can be intellectual property. And it's very much part of our case that you use the word extraction. That's it's spot on. We're talking about an extraction of a self, or of the privacy of Renty and Delia, resulting in a singular image, which was this daguerreotype. which is much more akin to a painting than it is a photograph, because you can't replicate them the way you can photographs from a negative. So it's very much involves this bundle of sticks where they don't have, it's a privacy right that they had, it's the right to their image that they had, it's the right to their dignity and their selves, and this constitutes a modern conception of property. Very much, and it is a tort. I mean, we are going on one of Tamara's she loves this principle of tort law, which is that in tort law, the wrongdoer is never rewarded for the acts of their wrongdoing. So this is Harvard, I don't want to get too sidetracked, but Harvard's argument is an absolute, which almost doesn't exist in common law, which is that a subject never owns the right to their photograph, and a photographer always owns the right. Of course, Harvard didn't take the picture, so you put an asterisk on that argument. So what are they doing with it? But beyond that, there is no absolute, because the common law will adjust, and will adjust to render a just result, and will never reward the wrongdoer. And here, Agassiz, as an agent of Harvard, was a wrongdoer, and Harvard continues that wrongdoing. Just in this case, they held up this book that they printed during the pendency of this case with the Renty and Delia daguerreotypes. And they say, see judges of the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court, we are good people. We are teaching, we are exposing these daguerreotypes to the world. And guess what's not in that book? A full-on account of Agassiz, their prize scientists, torture these people, or anything about the lawsuit at all. And it's just another free use. It's another exploitation, in this case, to defend them. So I don't know what to say about that other than what I just said.
Josh has a line, and you're going to have to help me with this. A tortfeasor does not benefit from the tort.
The fruits of their tort.
That's
right?
the line.
And you can't, a legal system that rewarded somebody for their wrongdoing would lead to anarchy, right? So it's not that complicated.
And the other thing to keep in mind is slavery was abolished in 1783 to 82, which made the commissioning of these daguerreotypes an illegal act, or the plunders of slavery in Massachusetts.
We have time for one more question. Anybody else? Is there one in the back? Yeah.
First of all, thank you for the movie. It's fantastic. It's such an important story. I'm wondering, do you get the feeling that the judge was maybe thinking, like, if I allow this the daguerreotype to go back, I got a lot of stuff I gotta get back. Do you think that kind of played in his mind a little bit?
I think so, but again, the greater purpose is justice and what's right. So if it means Pandora's Box opens, where justice is restored to people who are seeking redress or have been harmed, then so be it. You can't deny one person justice for fear of what might happen, and that would be, I would hope that, I assume that, but I would hope that that would not be the case, that he would deny me justice for fear of something someone else might bring.
Yeah, of course, Harvard, that's a big motivation behind Harvard, I would say, is that there are these 30 million artifacts that they have. And in that sense, it opens up Pandora's box. And that may be one of the reasons why don't you just give them back? Well, what else would they have to give back? And of course, this is an issue that all the museums all over the world are dealing with, particularly in Europe. And Harvard is very aware of that, and I don't think they want to open that door.
Great. Thank you all for being here, and thank you for the film. Well,